So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes for our people to log in. All right. Hi, my name is Jessica Lumpkin. I'm a career counselor with the University of North Florida. Welcome to our professional youth setting. This is a week-long career forum where we have various speakers and different employers that partner with our center to provide career readiness skills, talk about different career readiness topics to help students transition to the world of work. This career forum is a week before our OSPE Career Fair, which is Tuesday, October 6th. We have over numerous employers that come out to recruit our students for careers. This year, the career fair will be virtual, and you can register via handshake, and it's next Tuesday, October 6th from 3 to 6 p.m. The day before that, if the career fair may be a little intimidating for some students because it's on a larger scale, we have a smaller sale where you can meet with employers one-on-one for the diversity mixer, which will be October 5th from 7 to 8 p.m. And so definitely check out our website, which I'll put in the chat, so you'll be able to log in and see those different updates. And also, if you want to participate in other career readiness forums within professional youth, feel free to look at our website as well. I have the honor of introducing Jason Peoples. He is the Executive Director of the Jacksonville Arts and Music School. And today he's going to be talking about branding and website design. Thank you, Jason.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Jessica. I am honored to be here today and to talk to the students a little bit about branding and website design. For the purposes of today, I think I'll spend majority of the time talking more about the branding aspect, particularly the necessary need to have consistent branding in a ever-changing market, things that are rapidly changing all the time. So with that being said, I do want to make sure that I pay homage to the organization that I represent and that I have the esteemed pleasure of being the executive director of, which is Jacksonville Arts and Music School. We are a creative youth development program that uses arts-based instruction to empower the creative leaders of tomorrow. So by using film, dance, music, visual arts, and then our two clubs, which are overarching initiatives with robotics and taekwondo to galvanize leadership or use it as a conduit for leadership. We also have academic enrichment where we have instructors here that help kids with homework and in their studies, social and emotional learning, and leadership development, which is one of the staples here, those two programs. It really just depends on what age a student is in, whether they're in social and emotional learning, but then they just graduate from that program into our leadership program. But we use arts as a conduit for that. If you'd allow me, I would actually share my screen so that you can see. You can see here our website at www.jamslife.org, and also our social media handles is at JamsJax, and you can learn more about the organization itself, what we do, the initiatives that we have, who we service, where we're located, etc. We are in Jacksonville, Florida, but you can get the address and kind of figure out exactly where we are in the city. With that being said, I do want to kind of move ahead here and again talk about the consistency in branding in a rapidly changing market, and why it's important to have a strategic plan for branding yourself, your company, and or your product. In my generation and the generation that was before me, we had very little access to things. I mean, you were really on top of it if you had a website. Like that was like, you've arrived if you had a website, let alone the idea of having a cell phone. I mean, they barely exist at that time. And just to help you understand, like there was no MySpace for us. So, and MySpace has kind of been in the past for some time now. So it was very difficult for us to push our own brand, our personal brand, a product or a business to the top because of access. That does not necessarily mean that it's easier, any easier for today's generation or students coming out of college or those that have already graduated that are trying to build a brand, because now you'll have access to countless website platforms where they have templates already built for you. You also have access to various social media platforms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is that everybody has access to those things. So it becomes even more difficult to rise to the top of all of the noise that is happening around brand building, et cetera. So we're just gonna take some time to kind of figure out how we can attack some of these various angles and figure out how to set your brand apart. Again, whether that's a personal brand, a company brand, or a product that you're trying to push, all of them have the same construct associated with how you go about doing that. So first I want you to make me a promise that you don't let the importance of something complicated simplicity, okay? And what I mean by that is that as you look at these particular brands, devoid of their text, I'm pretty sure that you can make up all of these brands, whether it's Tesla, McDonald's, Starbucks, or Chick-fil-A, or of course the Jaguars. And the one thing that you notice immediately when you look at it in its entirety, it's really simple stuff. I mean, you got a D and a D for Dunkin' Donuts. You got a couple of circles that intersect for Audi. You got a chicken for Chick-fil-A. I mean, that was real inventive there. So it's important to understand that Nike was just a check at one point, and that Audi was just a couple of circles that intersect at one point. So you want to make sure that as you're deciding how you're going to brand yourself, that you understand that the most obvious approach is not always the easiest when you're comparing yourself to other brands that already exist. The biggest thing that you want to understand is that all of these brands started as ideas on a piece of paper, and whether it's at a diner or at someone's home, all of these brands started on a napkin, as we call it, a napkin idea. So don't allow it to be so complex. Sometimes simplicity is what's necessary. Again, you got a golden M for a McDonald's sign. You look at these brands now and you see how much money they've accumulated, their net worth, etc. And sometimes that can feed the notion that it's more complex than what it really is. So if you don't allow me, I would like to kind of back up a little bit and kind of share my story and how I came to be in the position that I'm in today. It's quite eventful and one that I did not see myself undertaking when I first set out on life. You're talking to an individual that is prior service. As a kid, I did a lot of sports and art growing up. I was often placed in leadership roles because I was the tall kid that had the early growth spurt until about high school. So I got my field of leadership opportunities. A buddy of mine taught me about HTML coding early on in high school, which interests me. I would eventually go to the Army, as I said before, and serve overseas. I would get out of the Army and go to Full Sail for recording engineering. Then I would go to school for multimedia design. And there was all of these things that I really, really loved to do, or I had interest in. So it was very unconventional for me, or it felt unconventional because what I perceived as conventional was different. And again, I was making it more complex than it really was. And I'll show you how. So I had the opportunity to work with this marketing company a few years ago before. As a matter of fact, it was the last company I worked for before I came to JAMS. And I chose it over another opportunity to go overseas to Dubai. Yes, I left Dubai on the table because my third daughter was being born, and I had the opportunity for this marketing company and or to go to Dubai, and I chose the marketing company so I could stay here in Jacksonville and be with my family and my daughter. But I digress. I was at this marketing company, and I loved everything about it. And I had the opportunity to be the primary editor for that company of videos that we were video content that we were putting out. And so one day I'm editing some footage. I can't even tell you what it was I was editing at the time. But I get a call from my now board chair, who's the founder of the organization. And he's on the other line, and he says to me, hey, a mutual friend gave me your number, your name and your number. And he said, I should call you about this opportunity. We have this nonprofit arts program that is serving youth, and we're kind of running out of a shoebox right now, and we need an executive director to help us take it to the next level. Now, one, I'm confused about what is unconventional work versus what is conventional, and how that plays into my personal branding and what I want to do with my own life. And so you can imagine me on the call trying to figure out what in the world does this have to do with me as a multimedia, former Army, sports guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, outside of just liking working with youth. There wasn't a lot of connective tissue that I could see. So he says to me that, a mutual friend gave him my name and number. And immediately I asked, well, who's the mutual friend? And he says, oh, a guy by the name of John. And immediately my eyes kind of rolled back in my head. And I'm like, oh my God, what has John gotten me into now? And then Ted went on, and he was like, well, he says that you're the only person that he could think of that could possibly do what we are needing done. But what came next was the defining moment for me that made me put things into a simplistic fashion. He said that John went on to say that he is somewhat of he is somewhat of a Renaissance man. And immediately, it was almost immediate that I understood how all of these things that I had done played into this role. Here was this arts program that was centered around using arts to create leadership or to create creative thinkers. And both of these things I had plenty of time with and experience with. I had the opportunity to work with a lot of artists and create content for CW17 and Bounce TV with a lot of artists, which gave me connections to reach out to various teachers. Literally, my executive of education here is Aaron Kendrick, who was on one of the first shows that we shot for CW17 as an artist. So when it came time for me to look for a visual artist, here she was. So you can see how all these things started to kind of come together for me. And I realized at that moment that I was a Renaissance man, and it was just a matter of figuring out how just being a Renaissance man is translated into something deeper. So at its core, Renaissance man, now it was time for me to start chiseling down, and that's when it became interesting.
A season of face perfection. What's this?
Start typing that. Sometimes a simple rhythm of typing gets us from page 1 to page 2. And when you begin to feel your own words, start typing them.
So that's actually one of my favorite movies, Finding Forrester. But what I found interesting about that was the development process. There are three things that I want you to understand about making a decision. That's one of the first things that you have to do is making the decision. For me, it was making the decision to understand or coming into knowledge of, man, you're a Renaissance man. And now it was making a decision on where I was going to take that. And one of the first things I did was, in deciding that, then it was like, what are you going to be known for? And that's one of the things that you have to ask yourself. What are you going to be known for? And a lot of times this comes in a form of a personal mantra or a model for a company, whatever that is. For me, it was a leader of creators. And then I later adopted also with that builder by nature. So I had these two mantras that I developed for myself that were short and sweet, 3 words to describe what you were going to get from me. I knew that I was a leader. I knew I was going into a situation where I would be required to lead other creators, those that some that didn't think with both sides of their brains, some that do. It's very interesting. As a creator myself, it's very interesting leading creators. So I knew that that was going to be something that was a challenge that many people cannot do, and it was going to be unique to me. But I also knew that I was going into a situation where I was building an organization or helping that organization to go from that shoebox to what it is today. So, and I realized that I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the building process and putting my stamp on an organization or a project or whatnot. And that was just a creator in me. So that was where I got those two mantras from. So I encourage you to figure out what that is for you. Then you need to establish your core values. And a lot of times your core values kind of sync right back to whatever that mantra is for yourself. And it's whatever you want people to specifically point back to you. Are you approachable? You always want to be approachable. You always want to be informative. Whatever those core values are that you want to have for yourself and your brand. And then third, you should always make sure that you research similar brands and then mimic good practices. Notice I didn't say take or copy or plagiarize or anything like that, or create market confusion. None of those things, but mimic good practices. One of the things that I did immediately when I got to Jams was I evaluated what we had here, and I placed that against the values that I established, and then my mantra. And I started to look for other organizations that I wanted our brand to mimic. And I came across 3, and I think that's always a good number because you always have a tiebreaker. And I came across 3, which was the Harlem Children's Zone up in New York, Inner City Arts out in LA, and Ron Clark Academy up in Atlanta. Now, all 3 of these models are similar. All of them are dealing with youth and education to some degree, but they were very different, where the Harlem Children's Zone kind of focused on blocks and blocks and blocks of the city, where they were serving underserved youth through the schools and this web of connectivity between the schools and VBK and daycare and food services and everything, while Inner City Arts was a lot similar to where we are now as a after-school program, summer camp program. But they also had a lot of dealings with the school system in LA and dealing heavily with language and ESOL students, etc., and using arts to kind of bridge the gap between cultures. And then you had Ron Clark Academy, which was this vibrant charter school or private school, I'll say charter school up in Atlanta, that had this robust model and really, really energetic. And they had this whole Harry Potter feel and everything else. So I started to look at those various different models, and I began to mimic things that I saw or start to bring them in. And it's important to do that until you can find your own voice. Sometimes it's just about getting that document and begin typing what you see until you find your own voice. And as the years went on, we kept finding our own voice. And now, year 3 of me being the executive director of GEMS, I truly feel like we have our own voice now, and people are starting to understand who GEMS is, and starting to understand who I am by way of what we've been able to accomplish. They see that I'm a leader of creators because they see how the creators are willing to follow me. They see that I'm a builder by nature because we just had a grand opening of some new parts of our building that we were able to get renovated amid COVID-19. So just being able to strategically plan and strategically move in order to do that further played into the overall values that we have and the branding of who we are and who I am personally.
Where is he? I don't know. He killed a detective today. Where is he?
Who got killed, man?
Connor,
Who died, Lee?
you.
Detective you?
Not you, you.
Who?
You.
Who?
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Don't nobody understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, man.
So again, with this is probably one of the most important parts that people tend to overlook when it comes to branding and creating a consistent brand, that you need to ensure that the value proposition is there. More importantly, you need that the best practice is to make sure that that value proposition is directly connected to your core values, so that you do them instinctively. Your core values should be constructed as such that you do it instinctively. You do it what you're instinctively wired to do, is what I love to say. If you're instinctively wired to do those things that are your core values, and your value proposition is connected to those core values, then it makes it really, really hard for you to lose the consistency of what you're giving to your customers, to those that know you, whatever capacity it is, whether it's you as an artist, as a recording artist, as a visual artist, as a business owner, etc. It makes it really hard for you to deviate from those that value proposition when they're engraved in who you are. So make sure that your value proposition is inserted in the DNA of your core values. Also, I have an expression that I say to my leadership team here, and that is that perception precedes reality. And when you're creating your brand, specifically when you're creating your websites, producing your social platforms, you need to ensure that the perception given is that of quality. And you do this by establishing a consistent look and feel, using quality images and well-written content. First of all, there are a lot of different resources out there for quality images like iStock Photo and 123rf.com. These various platforms provide opportunity for quality imagery. One of my favorite platforms, and I apologize because I don't think I had this on one of the slides, but one of my favorite platforms to use is Placeit. My younger brother and I, we have an apparel company as well. Again, getting those creative juices out that we just started, and we use Placeit a lot because we don't have access to all of these models on hand or product on hand to do a whole lot of photo shoots and video ops and whatnot. So using Placeit.com allows us to be able to take whatever designs we have and place it on real models or real objects, and it looks exactly as if we have taken that video, or shot that video rather, or taken that picture And it allows us to have consistency in our brand because we're able to find the imagery that that is best suited for what we want. Also, I like Fiverr as well. Fiverr.com is a great resource. As a multimedia professional, I've done a lot of logo design, a lot of poster designs, etc., campaigns and whatnot. But sometimes you get into a crunch, and it's time versus money, or it's man, I really don't know how to use this particular program as well, and I know I need to use this program to achieve this level of quality. So let me talk to this particular individual on Fiverr about getting it done. So that's another one of those platforms that I love to use. But your presence online should be a unified appearance across the board. You can make 1,000 posts online, but if they're not quality, if the perception of those posts are lacking quality, then you can forget about it. You know, there's too much things happening, and it goes back to what we were talking about at the top of the class, where we're saying, hey, look, you guys have the advantage of having access to all of these social platforms, all of this content, but the issue is that everyone else does too. And if everyone else has access to those things, and their website or their social presence is much stronger and much clearer, more concise, and it has higher quality levels, then you're going to get pushed to the side very quick, and you're going to fall. Of course, there's other things that play into that, hashtags and other different tagging mechanisms that will help to put you at the top of the chart. But I'm sure that some of you have thought that you were going to get this great product when you click the link, only to find out that it wasn't as great as you thought it was, or you ordered a shirt or ordered a pair of pants or booked a particular artist, only to find out that the quality did not meet the perception. So you definitely want to make sure that the quality is there, but you want to make sure that the perception precedes reality. And then when a person is met with reality, they meet you as a brand. They are met with your business as a brand, or they're met with your product as the brand, that it matches the perception that they have, because then that spreads like wildfire. So make sure that you do that. And in the interest of keeping things unified, it can be very difficult when you spread yourself thin. I've met many people that they have every social media platform that ever comes out. I mean, they have everything. And that is very, very dangerous if that is not like your full-time job. If you are the brand and all you're doing is promoting yourself on social media day in and day out, then go for it. But a lot of times that can be daunting, and it can definitely reduce something loses in that construct. At some point, you fall off on posting to Instagram, or you fall off on your Twitter posts, or you stop doing your TikToks every day. My philosophy is that you choose 2 platforms that you are going to master, and you become the master of those 2 platforms. Furthermore, I suggest that you, in choosing those 2 platforms, that you choose a value versus an engagement platform. So a value platform is a platform that you can produce long form content on, right? So your Facebook, you can put paragraphs for days if somebody will actually read it, and on YouTube you can put extensive videos. There have been plenty of times where I've chosen to put a video on Facebook or YouTube over Instagram because I needed more time. So long form is what you're looking at with value. You're adding value to people. You're giving them information about something. You're giving them feedback on products, etc. Engagement is things like TikTok or Instagram that you use in order to really engage with your customer base, or whoever you want to engage back and forth with you. This is where you actually read the comments, and there's an inside joke with that. My daughters and I, watch Wreck-It Ralph 2, and one of the characters on there said, you never read the comments. But in this case, with engagement is where you actually go to read the comments and actually engage with your audience and talk to them and be approachable. Now, again, that's one of those things that goes back to your core values. Do you want to be known as someone that is approachable? Hollywood, there's no such thing as bad press. Some people just, don't want to be approachable because they want to be known as a person that's not approachable. So if you don't need an engagement one because you don't want to be approachable, or you have an engagement one that you really don't engage with people, you just post stuff on, so be it. But in this particular construct, a value oriented social media is pointing directly to long form like Facebook and or YouTube that adds value, and engagement is more about talking back and forth with your customer base. So keep that in mind. Oh, I think we missed one here. Okay, we don't want to play this one. All right, well, sorry about that. I'm not sure why that one doesn't want to play, but it was an older video on basically Simba not knowing who he was and just being talked to by Rafiki about knowing who he was. So, which leads me to this slide, and this is one of the last slides that I have. I don't even know how much time I actually have or how long I've been going, but this is one of the last slides I have, and it's the most important from my vantage point, and that is to remember who you are in the whole process of branding yourself, your company, or your brand. Again, there's a lot of intersecting pieces here that we're talking about in terms of, okay, in remembering who you are, it's really easy to remember who you are when the core values are connected to who you are. That helps so much, and that's why it's at the top of the to-do list, is to make sure that you have those core values in place, because it's going to make sure that you're clear and concise, and it's going to make sure that you maintain the integrity of who you are. So in knowing who you are, you definitely want to make sure that you know your audience. Okay, so know your audience and know what they appreciate. Again, I have no idea why Sharknado was a thing. Why are you making so many movies about Sharknado? That is the last thing that I want to see. But there are those that go out purposely looking for bad movies. They purposely enjoy watching bad movies. And that's just knowing your audience. So when you know your audience, you're not worried about, when you are reading the content, or you are reading the comments rather on your engagement social media platforms, you're not worried about the feedback or the negative feedback that you're getting. It's very easy for you to skip past that and keep going on to the next 100 or so people that are actually interested in what you're talking about. And bear in mind, all you need is 1,000 people that is spending $100 on you a year to have $100K a year, to have $100,000 a year. You just need 1,000 people spending $100 on you. So if you can connect with 1,000 people that love everything that you do, and they're able to identify with your brand, identify with your product or your company to the point to where it starts to turn into profit, and they want to spend money on that $100 a year, you can make $100,000 a year. So know your audience and attack that. It also keeps you honest as well. You don't try to please everybody in that construct as well. You stick to what you know. You stick to your core values. Number two, believe in what you're selling. If you don't believe in what you're selling, it's going to crash and burn at some point. So you want to make sure that you're actually set out with, again, core values that point back to you believing in what you are selling. And always, 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 always be yourself. Eventually, it will crash and burn if you are not being yourself through the branding process. You have those individuals that they have their stage presence or their stage name, and then they have who they are off stage. But somewhere along those lines, there is still a connective tissue between who that person is on stage and who they are off stage. You can say it's an alter ego, you can say all of these things, but they are still the same person, and there's some connective tissue to that stage presence versus them being themselves. So make sure you're always conscious about being yourself, and those values again will make sure that that you stay true to that. So again, I hope that this helps someone out there to understand how to better prepare themselves for the branding process. It's not as binary, it's not as ones and zeros as one may think. You can go through a lifetime of videos and content and master classes or professional classes like this, and find things that you like and you don't like. Bruce Lee said it best, do a lot of martial arts and take from it what works for you. And that's what I really wanted to make sure that we cover today, is kind of my journey and some of the things that I picked up along the way that might not necessarily connect with all of you. But again, I know my audience and I know the people that will actually understand where I'm coming from. And I believe in what I'm selling, and I'm definitely being myself. So I encourage you guys to continue to build your brand. Just for your knowledge, these are some of the websites that are out there, web platforms that are out there that provide some excellent design platforms and pre-populated web designs already. I love to use Wix. I know HTML coding, DHTML coding. I know some Java. I know CSS coding and all these things that are used to build websites. And I still will default to Wix because it's just quicker. And unless I'm going to have things flying off the screen and I need this really robust coding, Wix has really done a great job of making sure that everything that I need is there. So that's my preferred platform to use. But Squarespace, Weebly, GoDaddy, WordPress, it's really just about mastering whatever it is that you're using. So I hope that that this class helped you. I hope that what I've said has helped you. And if I have anyone that has any questions, I will take them now.
If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the question and answer, or you can put it in the chat if you have any questions for Jason. Lauren said that was amazing. So you got a comment of that is amazing.
Thank you, Lauren.
All right.
You see me shaking over here?
Yes. So I didn't know if you wanted to give any final words on branding or websiting that can kind of close us out, maybe something that you want to leave them with, a nugget or something that can kind of help them move forward into this next phase into their life as creating their brand and creating their website.
Yeah, one of the quotes that I always carry with me, or one of the sayings that I always carry with me from Bob Iger, who used to run Disney, he said, creativity is a risk in itself. Like, creativity is a risk in itself. So as you set out to create those brands, know that, you're not always going to succeed the first time. Again, I did a lot of various different things before I landed where I am now. So make sure that you don't get discouraged by any failure you have in creating that brand. And just keep pushing forward. If you have any questions for me, or if you ever want to come by the campus again, our website was on the first slide. It's www.jamslife.org. Our social handles is at JamsJax. You can reach out to me and I'll answer any questions at any time for you all. And if I don't know the answer, I will definitely point you in the right direction.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. I put his website in the chat, so definitely go to jamslife.org and check out the website and all the good things that are happening at JAMS. If you want to participate in any other professional use settings, please visit our website. I also put that in the chat, and I look forward to meeting with you guys, possibly in person, to connect with us for any career appointments or career counseling. So thank you so much. Thank you, Jason, and that concludes our session.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.